Hello, fellow humans. My name is Dorothy Laxton, and this is Fostering Untethered Communication and Knowledge, an adventure in stimulating objective, critical thought, shining the spotlight through individual spectacles, putting it once again on the bigger picture and our parts in it. Searching for life beyond the lifestyles we North American urban dwellers have to choose to chase, encouraging all to participate in positive change. Good morning. It is March 22nd, 2022. It's a little later in the morning than I usually do this. I was going to try and skip this Tuesday, but it is the last Tuesday that I am going to have Wi-Fi for a while. So I figured I would record something and make a video, and I was sitting here waiting for my breakfast indulgence to complete heating, and I've been watching a lot of Blaire White recently. I tripped across her a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if I've mentioned this in other streams. This is one is a little less stream of consciousness and a little more, I really want to say some stuff. I've found myself in the past 6 months to a year watching and aligning myself with voices that I'm not really comfortable with, but they're talking about stuff that I think really needs to be talked about. And primarily that is the protection of children. And I have been of the opinion that we abandoned children in childhood like in the 80s. Actually, before that, I am a direct result of the absolute irresponsibility of the 70s culturally. And that's a story that I'm having a very difficult time with, even as I approach 50 years old. Those first 6 years of your life are really fucking important. And what we're doing to children in those first 6 years of life right now is confusing the shit out of them with stuff that they just shouldn't even be near yet. It's just way too complicated. It's stuff their brains just don't get around at all. What they understand of boy and girl or not is what we present to them. And the more we present to them, the more they have to get confused about. And the less we present to them and the less that we indoctrinate and the more we just allow them to evolve into the experience of being a human being, the more likely we are going to find the right way to nurture them into healthy human beings. And what's happening right now is pretty much the exact opposite of that. We're stuffing kids' minds full of all sorts of things that they're not even really going to have any comprehension of before the ages of like between 10 and 12. And I'm pretty seriously convinced that I'm right about these ages from my own experience. From the fact that I was never one of those privileged people who got to blank out their childhood. I've always been very aware of my environment, of the things that happened to me, and the fact that they had an effect on me. I have always been very, very aware also that I don't quite fit here, that there's something wrong with me. And that is whether or not I was literally born as somebody with borderline personality disorder. I really do think that personality disorders and things like that develop because of an inability to properly nurture personality types that are basically blacklisted by society. And a growing lack of an appreciation for emotional sensitivity in our world. God, we've just gone to the wrong extremes on so many things. Anyway, so I got thinking about Blaire White, and I got thinking about the fact that people are calling her anti-trans, and she's not anti-trans. I have my issues. I'm not anti-trans. I completely 100% recognize that there are people who experience things like gender dysphoria. I myself am somebody who has had nowhere near severe, and it's not the same thing, because for me, it's not a matter of I don't feel like I'm actually a woman. And it's not that I don't feel like I actually am. It's really, honestly, and this is, I would love to have a conversation with Blaire about what non-binary is. At least to me, as somebody who has, since the early 90s, before this conversation actually really became a conversation publicly, in the early days when it was developing and everything was still just LGBT was kind of starting to come into it. And I was actually seriously having these conversations. There were a few years where I was very actively a straight, because I used to joke that I was a gay man trapped in a woman's body, and I actually, there's always a kernel of truth somewhere in humor. But it's not something that I've ever openly discussed, because it was something really for me to sort out myself. I accept the gift of the body that I was given and the absolute privilege it is to be a woman. And I was given the gift of a child and going through that experience. And because of the ridiculous emphasis that was placed on sex and sexuality in my life because of my experiences as a child and the way that my life developed, I missed out on a lot of that, being a mother, between the need to be the strong, independent woman who could, make do and provide for my child without a man, because I could never find one that would stay with me for more than 2 years, because I have borderline personality disorder. I have issues with interpersonal relationships because I'm an incredibly emotionally sensitive person. That's my breakfast being ready. Back to Blaire White. I've experienced a lot of things in my life. Victim of early childhood sexual abuse. I was raped later in my life twice. Once was a stranger situation in a public place, although it was not violent. And the second was a partner. Then again, I've had interactions with men where I get so over the top that it's like, whoa, Nelly. And I had a man once tell me that an experience with me was kind of like rape. That really threw me and made me consider what was going on in me at the time, I gotta tell you. But back to Blaire White. I completely understand why she's offended by non-binary being thrown in with trans, because they are incredibly different things. Somebody who is trans, and this is what Blaire is trying to impress upon people, because so much ambiguity has just been thrown into trans, because trans is not traditional. Trans is the opposite. But trans is not anything under the sun. Trans is, you are born with a girl's body and you feel like you should be a boy. Literally, you feel like you should not have body parts or you should have body parts. I personally have never felt like I should not have my breasts. I'm quite actually fond of them. I have, however, felt like I should have a penis at times. And it is a very disorienting experience when you physically feel like your body is wrong. It happens sometimes. However, I have always, since a very young age, associated with more masculine things. Not to say that there weren't girly aspects to me, and there's part of me that wonders how much, I know that some of it is natural, because just the earliest thing I wanted to be was a ballerina. or a ballet dancer anyway. That isn't necessarily male or female, but dancing was what I wanted to do. Dancing is a beautiful form of expression and meditation and physical activity. It's a beautiful gift that we have that I can't do anymore because of the way that I've treated my body. And admission, some of the physical ailments that I deal with are direct results of extreme sex acts. Because I, in my first 6 years, got it impressed in my brain that the only thing that was of any real worth in me, anything that anybody liked or had any interest in, was me sexually, what I could do. And I was very well trained at a very early age. I am a master of avoiding the gag reflex, and have been since I was less than 10, maybe 8, even 6. Just so you know. And we're in an environment now in this world where people are literally teaching 4 to 6-year-olds about oral sex. When I was 4 to 6 years old, having it rammed down my throat. And I know what the lifetime consequences of that are. And I find it really offensive, actually, the way that all of these things have been used as tools to create fear and division. And the people who actually suffer, not only do we get insulted by things like, I'm sorry. There was several years ago now, this whole notion of rape anxiety in women who had gotten like nowhere near sexual violence, and the equating of like somebody hooting at you from across the street to what happened to me as a child. And this wasn't adults who did it to me, by the way. These were children who were exposed to things that they didn't understand and started acting out on other kids. And this is what we're teaching in schools now, in this country, in Canada. When did we stop giving a fuck about kids, guys? When? And when are we going to start caring about them again and not getting our fucking jollies or presenting to the world the way that we want to present and forcing it down children's throats, literally? How dare we stop puberty? Okay, I am quite convinced that one of the reasons why I am such a masculine female is because, and I got this tested at like 22 years old, because I had so many masculine traits and I was very hirsute and I was starting to grow a mustache. And yeah, my testosterone levels have always ridden at the high end of normal. I wouldn't be surprised if my estrogen levels, because I am just generally, yes, a very emotional person. And do I think that hormones have something to do with that? Yes. Do I accept these realities? Yes. In the whole period of time where feminists were like, don't, accuse me of having PMS, I'm like, no, wait a second. Have some sympathy for me. I'm experiencing PMS right now. It is part of my human condition as a woman being given this gift where I can create and carry life in the way that in my lifetime all of this has been not just disparaged and demeaned, but absolutely vilified. We have Facebook pages like Uplift posting these wonderful articles about free liberated women who see children as screaming poop monsters. And we wonder why, some more conservative people who actually have traditional values and believe in the necessity of traditional familial roles, the need for mothers to be mothers to their children, whether that ends up being the male or the female parent, or whatever, that role, that incredibly important role that nobody wants to recognize, because you know what? It doesn't make money. It makes people. It makes people. Mothers should be paid. Good mothers should be paid more than CEOs. But we refuse to recognize them because other than actually creating people, they don't put anything into the economy. It's ridiculous. I get why people like Blaire White are insulted by everybody with any kind of sexual ambiguity hijacking the trans label. Trans is not anything goes. Trans is you're born in one physical body and you feel like you should have the other type. So much so that it makes you despair. And you need to make changes to fit into yourself, and it is a very rare condition. And it is different from non-binary because I very much appreciate everything in me that is female and everything that is in me that is masculine. And I recognize the bits of those things that are toxic, and I try to do something about them rather than saying one or the other is bad or good. And I do acknowledge that I said this back, I think it was in like 1992. These conversations started with me in 1989 when a male friend of mine looked at me and said, "Dorothy, you are the least female I know." Not to say you're not feminine, because I'm very feminine, and because of my upbringing, I embraced the fact that I was a hot chick that could do some stuff. And man, you know, that therapist who, you know, got me diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and all set up with all my wonderful coping mechanisms. And wow, it was amazing that I could take ownership of my sexuality and enjoy it and revel in it. It became the only thing that was good in me. Of course I reveled in it. I reveled in the fact that I am very good at avoiding my gag reflex. I reveled in it. Just like I reveled in my ability to drink my brothers under the table, which is another thing that, 15 years of being an alcoholic is another thing that robbed me of some of my child. And I love him so much. The one thing I'll give myself is I was always real with him. I kept as much of this away from him as I could. But I never lied to him about the fact that I was a human being. And so is he. And it's okay. It's okay to be human, by the way, guys. It really is. So back to Blaire White, I completely understand, and quite frankly, I agree 100%. We need to clarify this whole trans thing because it's opening the doors, and this is something that Blaire talks about. Really like this woman. I have no problem calling Blaire a woman. Not at all. She has definitely earned it. Her maternal instincts are incredible. Her definite drive to protect children is so beautiful to me. And how could anybody think that somebody like her is wrong? I don't know. Jesus certainly wouldn't. And I know that a lot of people don't like those 5 letters, but that particular historical figure has been incredibly misrepresented for the last 2 centuries. That's another job I have to do right now. I really want to get to why this is offensive, because it trivializes experience and it's opening doors for so many predators. I have long been of the opinion that we need to scale back on our sexual liberty when it comes to public. Whatever you want to do, that's fine. But I mean, guys, no offense or anything, but there's a reason why pride is one of the 7 deadly sins. My biggest argument with our culture is our arrogance. We are arrogant. We are arrogant, stupid creatures that have allowed ourselves to have our intellects usurped and our amygdalas hooked, and we've been dragged around by them since at the very least the 50s, because that was when they really started drawing people into the consumer identity. They were replacing traditional sources of esteem like work ethic and family values, providing for your children, nurturing your children, teaching them to treat other human beings like human beings. That ceased, and everything became about what we have and the games that we can play and the TV shows. The reality we don't have to experience directly because we can do it vicariously, and that's just in the past 20 years, 30 years. It's just like, it's no wonder everybody's having identity crises, because we never have the time to actually see what we are anymore. We're presented with all of these options instead of actually just allowing ourselves to manifest as human beings and see where that goes and guide it. It's okay. Let's check this out. Like, I caught my son in front of the TV watching a show called The Toy Castle, which was 100%. There was a narrator that would come in every once in a while, but the story was all done in ballet. And I walked in on my son ballet dancing, about 6 years old, or trying to emulate the ballet dancing. And I asked him if he wanted to take dance classes. He's like, no. And there was part of me that wondered if it might have been his father's influence, like this is really not a boy thing. I didn't push it. I did ask him a few times. I gave him the opportunity. I said, like, it really doesn't matter if whatever. But he was just like, no, he was happy just pretending to dance in front of the TV with. That was fine by him. He liked acting things out. He would watch movies over and over and over again and costume up and act out scenes. So it wasn't terribly surprising when he decided to study drama, but that's my child, whom I love. And if he becomes a parent and has children, I don't want them to be schooled by sexual predators. I'm sorry, but that's a lot of what's going on right now. It's narcissism and predatory behavior, and it's ideological indoctrination, which, I'm sorry, but I really thought that was the problem in the first place. And that is what brought me to actually starting to speak out about this, because we now have a law in this country, and I understand that what it's called, being against it, is not a very popular thing, but the way that it's worded, for somebody like me who's a firm believer that, none of us are born wrong. We are all born with a struggle of some sort that we have to deal with. And for some people, that is, I was born as a girl and I feel more like a boy. And for some people, that's, I have these urges and I, want to act them out, and I know that they're harmful and wrong. So I got to struggle with that. I have compassion for all people. Someday I will find ways to tell some stories about some people, true stories, without actually exposing who they are, because they're vulnerable stories about people, some of whom are deceased, and they can't defend themselves, and quite frankly, they wouldn't want it to be public knowledge that this is something that they experienced. However, the story of the experience and the transformation in said people is got some valuable information and wisdom and in them. Human beings are incredible, complex creatures, and we need to stop making it more confusing and start allowing ourselves to get to know and understand ourselves without all of the marketing crap. You know, we've got to stop commodifying ourselves. You know, I'm petrified of it. You know, things like this social capital crap. I don't know what we're doing, guys, but that's a lot of thoughts. It became a stream of consciousness. We'll see if this actually gets out today on this Toosday. Toosday. Mind you, every day is a Tuesday for me because my brain thinks about these things that most of us don't actually think about, but really need to start because, again, at this point, it really is the future. Our children, we cannot allow what's happening to happen. The over-sexualization of children, the introduction of this information too early, the physical interventions that happen before actual rational sentient decisions can be made by said people. The interruption of the natural process is far more dangerous than the allowing it to go on and figure it out later. It really is, because once you do something, you can't take it back. You can't take it back. Think about how we feel about female circumcision. Just think about it. Think about how you feel about female circumcision, or male circumcision for that matter. Think about what you feel about, a 13-year-old having a double mastectomy, or a 9-year-old being given hormone blockers. These are irreversible. Irreversible, okay? You can remove the hormone blocker from a child, but you cannot reverse the physiological effects of that. The long-term physiological effect. It has an effect. Once you intervene, you can't change it. If you let it be, you can always work with what's there. But once you intervene, you can't change that. You can't. As much as I would love to be able to go back and say, I understand those first 6 years of my life and it doesn't affect me anymore. I can't do that. I can't. And it sucks, I gotta tell you. Having a brain, an intellectual understanding, and pathways literally mapped that I'm slowly deconstructing, and emotional responses that, the average person who isn't somebody like me just thinks is, we all feel things. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. If you get punched in the arm, most of us will bruise a little, or it'll at least hurt. But a hemophiliac, you punch him in the arm hard enough and you can cause like a massive hemorrhage. That's the difference. So that's been a lot for this Tuesday. I think I'm going to stop and see if I can cut this together and put it out there, because again, I'll be losing my Wi-Fi in a week. I am trying to find ways to supplement being on disability. So I have a Redbubble shop. You go to redbubble.com. They are a print-on-demand service. I have some designs up there. Look for Doll Arts, DOLARTS. I have a website, which is also dollarts.com. I need some help with that. I'm debating whether or not I'm going to keep that page or just start from scratch. I also have a Buy Me a Coffee account where you can buy me a breath. One is $2. I do eat credit card fees. And that's buymeacoffee.com people. And I believe on that one I'm bystresscookie. It could be Dollarts as well. I will have that in the description. I guess I should, start shamelessly plugging myself if I'm going to do such things. I don't know if I ever really got to what I wanted to talk about, which was really ultimately, I understand why Blaire White and why many people, honestly, I think the trans community should be offended by the way that it's being hijacked by all sorts of ambivalence. It's insulting. The first time I felt insulted about something like this, I was in high school. And I was relaying to a friend my experiences being sexually abused. And this person, who years later it came to light was actually a compulsive liar, and it was so funny because at the time, like, she said to me she was raped. And there was something about it. I just knew she was lying to me. And it was very insulting. I get why she did it. Like, I completely understood the circumstances, the context of the conversation and everything. She was trying to be empathetic. It turned out this woman had a history of doing this kind of thing. And, yeah. So I get why people hijacking an identity label that is supposed to be clarifying and muddying it up. I understand why that's offensive and why it's something that she speaks out against. I think that Blaire could use, a conversation or two about what non-binary is, and, maybe NB becoming a thing is not a bad thing because it gives a not trans title to non-binary folk. I'm even kind of up in the air on non-binary because it's more like I'm double binary. It's like I'm both. Only physically I present as a woman. But consistently through my life I have tested in the middle of both AB personality type tests and masculine feminine personality types. I see myself as an extreme manifestation of the human condition, and have found that with all that I've tried to function in a society that just does not understand at all the way I actually function or allow for it, and I'm in a position now where I can allow myself to actually learn how to function the way I actually function so that I might actually become a functioning member of society. That would be super, wouldn't it? In the meantime, I have to try and find ways to pay the rent and eat. And the best way I found so far was taken from me. I'm hoping to get it back. I was busking at a nearby plaza that's just perfect. It allowed me to share with my neighbors and allowed them to express the value back to me, which was enough to allow me to eat well all summer last summer, which was great. Got to work on that one. But I have the Redbubble and I have the Buy Me a Coffee. And, I was told 20 some odd years ago that I needed a patron so I could go and do all the creative things that I'm supposed to be doing. I've stayed away from Patreon for a number of reasons. One, I just can't maintain all of these accounts. It's not me. I'm trying really hard to function in a world that I'm not really designed for. So that said, I'm losing my Wi-Fi next week, which is why I keep babbling, and I'm going to post some sort of video today because I'd like to put some thoughts out there before I can't afford to do it. If you want to support me, you want to help support me, help me get my Wi-Fi back. I've got to find a way to, bring in at least another $200 a month to make that a reasonable thing. I've got my basic bills. My basic bills get covered, and I've got an extra $39 a month, once I've got the little, the communications that I'm retaining and my rent paid. So that's just the reality of it, and it would be great if you would like to help support me in my work. Links are in the description. Thank you very much for listening.